So we're here on Daf Hey Amid Beis. We're going to finish up the Agadato. V'laseis u'lasapachas. And these are the Simone Tuma for Tzaras. And the Gemara is going to darshan the meaning of laseis and lasapachas. And that is the following. Ain't se'es el loshan gavoa. Se'es is indicative of someone who builds himself up very high. Shenemar, as it says in Yeshaya, v'al kol haharim haramim v'al kol hakvos hanisaos. So we have a very high giv'ah that indicates a person who puts himself on high, and v'ein sapachas el tfela, but the word sapachas means the exact opposite, that he is tofel. He's like secondary. He doesn't have any of his own significance. Shenemar, because we see in Shmuel, who he had a nevuah about the Bnei Eli, that they would die, and they would not inherit the Kahuna Gedola. And in that nevuah, the formulation of Shmuel is Sfacheni na al achas hakuhunos lechol paslochem. Gather me together for one of the Mishmaras Kahuna, because I will no longer be in the state of Kahuna Gedola. And the literal translation of this pasuk is, attach me, which is Sfacheni, and attach me means like secondary, please, to one of the priestly divisions, to eat a morsel of bread. And Eli the Kohen Gadol is being informed by Shmuel, the Navi, that the Kahuna Gedola will no longer be an inheritance for his family to pass on to the next generation. And therefore his progeny will be forced to come before the new Kohen Gadol and plead, attach me, Sfacheni, to one of the 24 Mishmaros of Kahuna. So we see that the word Sefach, Samach Pei Ches, is the root of something that's subsidiary. And someone who becomes haughty, who se'es, will ultimately become subordinate, will become sapachas. So that's the drasha here. Let's take a look at the karbonos in the Beis Hamikdash to derive the conclusion that God is very supportive and very attached to those who are low of spirit. Because when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Adam Makriv Ola, which is completely kolil, al mizbeach, and schar ola biyada. Makriv mincha, if he brings a korban mincha which is made of kemach, is schar mincha biyada. And he doesn't get the schar for other karbanos. Every single carbon generates its own individual particular schar. Aval misha daito shvela, but someone who's humble is malol of akosuk yilikrav as kol karbanos kula. He gets credit for all the different kinds and categories of karbanos shenemar, because it says in Tehillim, zivchei Elohim ruach nishbara, and the word zivchei in plural includes all the karbanos. And Ruach Nishbar is indicative of someone who's daito shvelo. And furthermore, not only is it true that it's as if he brought all the karbanos, but moreover, Elo she'ein tfilosim asas, God will never reject his tfilos. Shenemar, as we see in the next part of that same pasuk in Tehillim, Leiv nishbar v'nidke, Elokim lo tivzeh. God will never, in a sense, humiliate or reject his tefillos. They'll never be repulsive. That means he evaluates his path, and he always is introspective in looking into his meisim. He is the person who weighs the hefsed mitzvah against the schar mitzvah, and the schar vary against hefseda, and he will merit to see the ultimate redemption of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when God will bring about the salvation of the Jewish people. Shenemar, it says in Tehillim, V'sam derech, he who evaluates his approach, his actions, Er'enu b'yesh Elokim, I will show him the salvation of Hashem. Al tikre v'sam el v'sham derech. So instead of reading it as a sin, you read it as a shin with the nakuda on the right side. And this is the end of the Agadah. Now we go back to our Mishnah. Ketzed mekane lo. He says in front of Tuedim, the husband says, don't speak to such a person. She went ahead and she spoke to such a person. She was not secluded with him, and she's considered muteris labaylo. She continues her relationship with her husband. She's lani truma. But if she enters into a private place with that person and she's there with a shear for a shear of kedei tuma, then she's no longer muteris labaylo. She's no longer allowed to be true. Ha gufa kasha. The Gemara raises a contradiction within the Mishnah itself, and the Reish and the Seif. Amid, on the one hand, in the Reish you say, Al Tadabri Ploni Imish Ploni Ze Alma Dibur Stirahu. Right? The Mishnah opens up, I said, Ketzad Makanila, and that kinui will culminate in Stira. And the answer was that he said to her, don't speak to so-and-so. So we see that speaking is enough to constitute a kinui that follows with the Stira. But on the other hand, the Mishnah tells us that if she violates that stira, it says, Dibra ima daimu teres lebeis teres lecha b'tshum alma, Dibra lav klum. You see that Dibra is not considered stira. Here's how you have to read the Mishnah. Al tidabri, don't speak to so-and-so. She violated his kina v'dibra. Or alternatively, he said to Al tidabri, and nistera ima, and she had stira with that person. Or if he said to Al tisteri, don't go into a private place with such a person, which is a full-fledged kinui, and she violated his kinui dibra ima, if she only spoke to him out in public. Adayin muteres lebeisa, muteres lecho b'truma. It does not constitute a violative stira. However, nithnasa ima lebeisa seisa, if she goes into a private place with him, v'shasa kedei tuah, and she stayed in that place for a shear of tuma, then asur lebeis asur lecha b'truma, she has violated a full-fledged kini and stira, and therefore she can no longer live with her husband. Then the Mishnah continues and says, "V'yimeis." Let's say after kini and stira, before the hashkas hamayim ma'orim, he died. Her husband died, and in fact they had no children. He had no children. Is then choletes, and we'll soon see lomas yabemis. So the Gemara takes us apart one by one. Amai, why is there no yibum and there's only chalitza? Tisyabim nami yibume, because as far as we know, she did not have znus tachas hayavam. Right? Maybe she had znus, possibly, but we don't know that for sure. And therefore, why should we exclude Yimu? He says here that she's a suspected Sotah, and therefore l'chumra, we have to always assume that perhaps she in fact was mezana and she was guilty as accused. So then, why does the Gemara assume in the kasha before of Yosef that yibume nami yibume? So this is a kasha that's raised by the Tosa Rosh. And he says the following, that a sota is like an erva because the Torah calls her v'nitma. And also there's a lav that prohibits the husband, or for that matter, the boel, for having any relations with her. And this is because she's considered Tmeah. And these two factors, l'chora, should exempt her from Yibum. But that's only considered in the case of Vinitma. And the word Vinitma does not indicate a lotase. And for the eligibility of Yibum, or the opposite, for disqualification of Yibum, we need a violation of a lotase. And the lotase is based on the fact that she had this relationship, and we know that she had the relationship. He says, let me just read to you this language. He says, L'chumra donano sakin nitma, umasha hikshasa gemara she'af tisyavim, al af shanu choshin shezinsa, v'nemer batuma karayos, is l'chor yesh lanu lahachmir ba kis Sotah vadai she'ena misyabenes, hainu mishum she'rak bis Sotah vadai nemer batuma b'loshen lav, lo yuchal baila harishon meaning that this tumah is considered like an erva, and therefore you can't have a relationship with her. But Sotah is a suffix shet tumah, is lo nemer b'loshen lav, asher acher asher hu tamah is a loshen of vadai. But in the case of a Sotah who's only a suffix, it doesn't have the lav, and therefore in such a case, the lav doesn't apply. And the Gemara thinks that Yibum therefore should apply. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, V'yatzami beisov al chol ish acher, and the word acher is completely superfluous. It could have said, V'yatzav isol ish, and therefore, we're going to learn the acher as a mute. L'Ish acher, she, the shomeres yava, is allowed to get married to another man, but v'lo yavam, but not to the yavam himself. If we follow your logic to its conclusion, then why does the Mishnah say that she needs chalitza? After all, if she's not included in the mitzvah of Yibum, then she should not, if she has no nefil fiyim, she should not require chalitza. Rav Yosef responds, ilu isa lebal, if the Baal himself would still be alive, milo boy get, there's no hafkasa issues. The marriage is still intact, despite the fact that she's asur al baila, but nevertheless, there is issues. And if there is issues, she cannot marry anyone else without a get. It's hashanami tiboy chalitza. Chalitza is going to be the substitute for a get. Isti Amri, according to the second transmission, Amar Rav Yosef, Rachmana Amar v'yotza mi beisov al chol v'isoli ish acher, which means that if a woman had znus, she was guilty of adultery, then he, the husband, has to divorce her, but he must give her a get. Delolistere lebese. And the reason why the Torah requires a get is because this is kind of a hachrova, like a churban, a tachriv, as basel. This is a znus which is horeses es habayis, and vi'at amitis yabim nami yibume, so that should she now mess up the family of the Yavam, it's bad enough that she messed up the family of the first husband. lo tinasi lo tistre lebese. According to your logic, okay, fine. You're saying that she is Eina Misya Bemis, so there's no Yivu. But what about someone else? I mean, she's allowed to marry someone else other than the Yavam, and why not say Lo Listere Lebese? That once again, by marrying someone else, then she's going to mess up his house. She's already a confirmed adulteress. Amalei